Hey guys, so I thought I'd bring another tier list by the data video but on extra deck monsters using Dueling Book data from ygeoscope.com. As always, a big thanks to my sponsors. As usual, links and discount codes in the description below. Now, the formula to calculate the tier score for this one is a little bit different than my usual tier list videos because I'm not considering any representation from Top Cut of YCS or similar events, so that component C is not included in the formula. Reason for this is because the count of which extra deck monster was played is heavily influenced by what deck might top cut, and since the extra deck monsters from the most played decks on Dueling Book will already have a larger tier score, I didn't want to influence that even further. So let's just get right into the tier list, and starting with the very first extra deck monster with the highest score is Sprite Elf, which I don't think should be a surprise. Sprite is a tier 1 deck and there are so many Sprite variants, most of which will be playing Elf at 3, and Elf will be hitting the field multiple times each game. Such a strong extra deck monster that gives you resource for days, it is justified as a top tier extra deck monster at this point. On a related note, at second was Gigantic Sprite, again played in multiples for the most part, although does not make an appearance as frequently as Elf, but it will definitely make the turn 1 board each time. Not only does it lock both players from summoning 2s, it can also get to 3200 attack, which can definitely come up, especially for the Tribute of Eradicator Epidemic Virus. Then we move on to an extra deck monster from the best deck of the format, which is Kit Kalos, an insane starter, especially thanks to Instant Fusion, that will just get the ball rolling for tier elements and is something that will always draw the Imperm to stop it. Next, we finally have a generic extra deck monster in IP Masquerena. Has been out for a little over 2 years now and is commonly seen in Sprite, but also other strong strategies such as Math Mech. Usually goes into Unicorn to shuffle an opponent's card for an added interruption, but Avermax is another option lately, as tier elements have a hard time outing that card with IP's protection effect on top of it. Lastly, in tier A is yet another tier elements monster in Root Kalos, which was a new addition from Darkwing Blast, as if they needed any further support, really provides another layer of protection and is really overall a strong addition to an already strong tier strategy. Starting off tier B, we have Hugin, which of course is mostly seen in Runic Sprite, but there's a small amount of pure Runic players, so can't discount them either. Really strong as it not only gets you the field spell to get your draws going, but it's also a level 2 and allows for you to start your Sprite plays without committing to a normal summon. Then we have Garura, a new card from Power of the Elements that quickly became the best Super Poly target in the game, although it would have been better if it was Wind to combat against Fluandereeze. The numbers are probably largely contributed from tier element strategies since they go into this even without using Super Poly, but it's definitely going to be in many decks as well. Next we have another new card from Darkwing Blast that really helps Sprite out, and that is Sprint. I'm sure the number for this will go up even higher with time, but it is such a strong card that just gets you free 2 bodies thanks to Angler. It also allows for Gigantic to become 3200 attack even easier, which is a nice bonus. Then we have yet another popular Super Poly target and an old one in Predaplan Dragostopelia. Definitely another mainstay if any deck runs Super Poly, and its effect to turn your opponent's monsters into level 1 is a very strong thing against Sprite at the moment, even though in the past that effect was mostly useless. Next we have another tier element extra deck monster in Kaleido Heart, which may not necessarily come out in every game, but when it does, you are probably in trouble. Definitely had a high match win percentage at 65% when it did hit the field, but do be skeptical of these win percentages because it's looking at the entire match and not specifically the game where this monster hit the field. Then we have my boy Totally Awesome, which for the most part is seen play in Sprite builds, but of course there are a small number of paleo and short players out there that are also making this. In Sprite builds at least, once they get to make Toad, then it's an uphill battle because it's just going to be constantly coming back through Elf, and a possible reason for the high win percentage when it hit the field. Next we have Albion Dragon, and interesting that this made it higher than Mirror Jade. My theory is that because YGeoScope looks at whether the card hit the field, grave, or banished, and Albion is commonly sent to the grave from the extra deck through various cards and effects to get that branded fusion or branded in red, and in multiple copies of that, this is probably the reason why it ranked higher. Strong card for sure and gets your branded fusion plays going. At the last of tier B is Dark the Dark Charmer, which has easily become the best Charmer Link monster out there. Becomes useful in Sprite mirrors, but also being able to add when this card is destroyed is sneaky good effect as well. Starting off in tier C is that Mirror Jade that we were talking about. Obviously as a monster it's much stronger than a card like Albion Dragon, but probably doesn't hit the field or grave as often as Albion, and that's why it got scored lower. The play of Branded Despia has certainly fallen off since Power of the Elements, as this card used to be ranked really high the last time I did this kind of video. Next is a related monster in Lubellion, which similar to Albion Dragon, just is there to help you start your fusion summons. Nothing more to say about this card. Then we have another generic extra deck monster in Barone, which while strong, has probably seen a lot of decline in play due to Sword Soul having kind of disappeared. Our first good generic level 10 Synchro, it's like a mini Dragoon and can negate and pop, which is great. Next we have another Super Poly target in Mud Dragon, and so if you're playing Super Poly, you're probably playing this, Dragostopelia and Garura as your 3 monsters. The targeting protection is not bad, but it just helps to provide a strong coverage of different Super Poly targets. Then we have Striker Dragon, which is mostly seen in Dragon Link, but there are other popular dragon strategies like Dragon Maid and Dragoonity, which will also utilize this card. Thanks to the release of Bestials, dragon strategies are coming back in play, and Striker Dragon is the best to start you off and is limited for a reason. Next we have Access Code Talker, which is probably the best Link 4 that is out there. Probably doesn't hit the field as much as it did before since Hulk got banned, which kills that classic Hulk to Celine play through effect failure, but if it does hit the field, then it's probably signaling the victory of that game, and the win percentage for that match is quite high if this card hit the field, but definitely be critical when interpreting these win percentages, as I mentioned earlier. We then have Nightmare Unicorn, which as I mentioned earlier is probably the most common target for IP Masquerena to interrupt on your opponent's turn. Avramax wasn't played enough to make it to this tier list video, but looks like Unicorn is still seeing a lot of play. Another Link 4 is Appaloosa, which while strong, definitely doesn't see that much play nowadays, with it being seen most commonly in Math Mech most likely. Monster effect negations are nice, but in a format where so many players are running Dark Ruler and droplets, may not be as strong as it once was. Next we have another dragon specific card in Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres, definitely an annoying one that's integral to the dragon strategy, where not only can it bounce on your opponent's turn, but can also special out a dragon that can help you with follow-up or even put out an interruption. Lastly, in Tier D, we start off with another branded monster in Masquerade, a strong card especially when paired with another one to burn your opponent as they try to make their plays. It could even come back as well. Certainly a strong extra deck monster and one of the most unique ones out there. Next we have Alambertian, which of course is essentially Math Mech exclusive monster. Helps to add that Math Mech card that you need, but technically can add you any spell or trap if you meet the conditions, so you could add something powerful as Dimension Barrier or a pointer. Lastly, we have Abyss Dweller, which of course is very strong against tier limits, but I guess because it's more matchup specific, it wasn't played enough to get ranked higher. I've also seen a lot of tier lists citing this card instead, so perhaps it's not a given for a lot of decks. Shutting off the grave effects can be crazy strong, and it's also only one-sided, which is the crazier part. Certainly a card that has been in discussions of getting banned at some point. Alright guys, so that was it for the extra deck tier list by the data. Hope you enjoyed that, and let me know what you guys think of how they were categorized. Definitely make sure to let me know what your favorite extra deck monster is as well. Mine is probably Cyber Dragon Infinity. As always, a big thanks to my Patreons, Eileen Dice Queen, Bolt Spider, Cybernetic, Brandon Jaren, Barrelord, Spooky Boogie, Stephen Phillips, and Chaz Blanks, as always for supporting the channel. You guys are awesome. If you're interested in joining my Patreon, link down below. Take care guys.